Greetings, you've landed at the VUC, IP Communications and VoIP community. We would like to thank Simwood.com for their support. Simwood can turn you as a developer into a telco. Our hosted PBX is from OnSIP.com. You can go to GetOnSIP.com for a URL people can click to call you. We've been privileged over the last 5 years to be using the best conference bridge on the planet. Yes, I'm talking about ZipDX.com, full color, full featured, full HD conference bridge. Our website, vuc.me on the webs, hosted by Bluehost.com. And our worldwide local rate dialers are from Voxbone.com. All right, thank you, Michael. And this is VUC 579. Every time I see the numbers, I wonder, how did we ever do that many of these things? But we did, and here we are. And today we're going to be talking to Jim Forster, and I'm going to do a switch here, because when you're all alone doing these things, you have to talk while you're doing it. And here's one version of me, okay? And it's Chrono. So Tim and I were talking, Jim, earlier, and we said, okay, Jim just did a formal interview, so let's do a casual one.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So this is why we're not too worried about the switching, and it's very informal, and I just turned the chroma encrusting off. So I'm going to just mention that there's a bunch of activity coming on in London, as Tim reminded me. Starting around the 9th of April, well, we're mid-February, so you got time to go reserve those things, and that would be, there's some TAD-HAG activity, lots of WebRTC stuff, and of course, the Cranky Geek, and our own Tim Panton will be in on all of that. So, speaking of Tim, let's turn it over to him, and he will introduce Jim, because you folks know each other, and I think it's better to do it that way. So, Tim, why don't you set it up? Don't forget to ask Jim how he got into technology. I'll let you do that.
Indeed. Yeah, no, actually, I'm struggling to remember where we first met. I suspect it will have been in Range's offices, but I couldn't be sure.
Or possibly actually the Burning Man that I went to.
Right. But yeah, so the thing we often do in these talks is to ask people how they got into tech. What was the thing? Was it a teacher? Was it the old radio they took to bits as a kid, or what triggered you into tech?
Gee, that's hard to remember, I guess. I took a summer math program my summer after my 10th year in school, and first exposed to programming and thought it was pretty cool. And so I guess I gradually got pulled towards programming, but always also had an interest in sort of the electrical engineering side. As a kid, I used to read these ham radio magazines and built a shortwave receiver as a kit, and actually a TV as a kit as well. So I had both. I like both the computer science and the electrical engineering side of things, or electronics, and that worked out real well because all this wireless stuff, there's a lot of software, but there's a little bit of physical RF and things like that as well. So I don't know exactly I can't remember a particular thing that brought me into tech, though.
Okay. So what was the first programming language? I'm curious.
Oh, wow.
Mine was BASIC, I think.
Yeah, that's what they learned. That's what they taught us at this math program. It was a time-sharing system at the University of Dartmouth, one of the early time-sharing systems. So yeah, I did that, but then I went to, and my first job out of school, we programmed in PDP-11 assembly language, and a lot of that, and a bit of Fortran, and then What4, and then I got us a Pascal compiler, and we did a lot with Pascal, even systems level work with some extensions and things. But I still like that language, but it's totally out of favor.
Yeah. So did you the PDP-11? Did you ever have one of those PDP-11s which crashed and you had to toggle in the bootloader from?
No. Our bootloader
dead start.
That was fine. Yeah, we didn't have to do that.
Okay. But no, I had to do that once.
That was that we were doing assembly language, and it was funds transfer for the banks in New York, wholesale funds transfer, and it was so easy to put in bugs, and they would cost a lot of money when the messages went in the wrong place. But hey, it was starting.
Yeah. Cool. And then, I mean, your background's kind of Cisco.
Yeah. So I Yeah, I went to school and grew up in the East Coast of the U.S. Went to school there, worked in Manhattan for 3 years or so, moved to California, worked at Intel for a year. That was a little bit boring. Went to a startup. That was great, but it failed after 3.5 years or so. Went to another startup in a sort of midlife, trying to stay alive, and that lasted. I stayed there 2.5 years, but I thought it was going to not succeed, and sure enough. But I was lucky enough to get a interview at Cisco, and so and I had that and another offer, and I was lucky enough to choose Cisco, so it worked out really well.
And if I remember rightly, you've got some patents to your name patents.
Yeah, patents, yes. Although at the time, early Cisco, we couldn't be bothered with them because they were boring and it was more fun to write code and more fun to make networks. But after a while, the business people convinced us that we needed to do patents, so I did a few. One was for a self-configuring router. The other were involved with a cable modem system that I worked on quite a bit, and for a highly availability feature.
Right, cool. And did you find? I mean, I've just done that process, and I found it fantastically annoying. Like you go in with a really neat, tidy engineering description, and then the lawyers kind of fluff it up into something.
No, I found it all very tedious.
Yes.
But I guess I accept that it was necessary. So.
Yeah.
More patent submissions after they put $500 if you just submit an idea, and another $500 if it's accepted to be processed as a potential patent and so forth. So there was these nice little bonuses available. That was a little motivation.
Okay, well, for me it's the other way around. Every time I do this, it costs me money. So it's like a real disincentive. It has to be a good one to be able to make it worth the effort. But yeah, so I mean, I noticed that it's taken us a little while to kind of sync up with you, and you've been traveling a lot.
Yeah.
So I was curious, what do you pack when you travel? What's your gadget of your favorite gadget?
I have a MacBook Air. I no longer have to carry extra batteries. I always used to take a couple extra batteries. I have an iPhone. I take my old iPhone that's unlocked. Well, the new one is too now, but I take so I have my U.S. phone active, and I have a local SIM if I'm there for more than 3 or 4 days or a week. Extra battery pack, spare cables. I pretty much have everything except the MacBook and the power supply. So I once lost a power supply for 4 hours, and it was in the middle of a trip in Africa, and it was a nightmare. The guy, I'd lent it to someone, and he drove off without giving it back, and I had to sync up with him and find it, get it back. Otherwise, in those days, Macs were not nearly so popular. So and I was in Tanzania, I think, so I might have had trouble getting a power supply.
Right. So you're actually quite a traveler. I mean, I wondered to what extent your motivation for some of this work is an excuse to go to nice places or interesting places.
I don't think it's quite that, but I enjoy that side of it quite a bit. So if I didn't like it, I wouldn't. But really, the motivation came about in 2003. Somebody asked me if Cisco could help them do. These people he knew were going to install a cyber cafe on the base camp of Mount Everest. And so I thought, well, all right, so how would it work? And he explained all they wanted was a couple long-distance wireless devices. And so I got them, and it was a little harder to figure out how to ship them to Nepal because manufacturing wasn't shipping there and export issues, but we finally figured that out, and they did it. And it made me realize that, gee, if you could have an internet at the base camp of Mount Everest, you could really have it anywhere on Earth. But, mountain climbing and Everest is, that's heroics, and they have all kinds of things. But so there must be issues, financial, policy, potentially social issues. So anyhow, it piqued my interest, and I got a little tired of product development at Cisco. So they were very nice to me and gave me a long leash, as it were. So I started looking at internet in Africa and India, and traveling, going to conferences, talking to Cisco sales, a little bit with their CSR, corporate social responsibility. Cisco had a very nice thing. They had a Cisco Network Academy program, and they were giving classes in networking in 110 countries around the world, something like that, and Cisco had sales offices in 70, or sales presence, so they were very widespread. And yeah, so that I spent several years doing that, got a little understanding of the need and how it might be done, and went to India for a conference that I helped organize in late 2006, and got a real taste of how to do lower cost networking. And creating infrastructure that is taking bandwidth from one place, spreading it, or relaying it across the countryside to where you want to, where your customers are.
So this is the thesis. This is the what's his name, William Gibson's thesis, that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed.
Well, yeah.
There's bandwidth in some places, just not necessarily where you want it.
Yeah. And the other aspect of that is that, by and large, I think that the technology that's being deployed worldwide has been largely determined by what is optimal or close to optimal for the economy, for the market in the U.S., Europe, Western Europe, Eastern Asia, things like that. So that's the initial market, because that's where the money is, that's where the demand is. Now, people, though, benefit from the internet all over the place. It's incredibly widespread, the value placed on it. However, most people don't have the money that we have here, so we think nothing of paying $3 for, a nice latte. $3 is a day's work for someone, and or maybe if they're lucky. So you look at what percentage of people will pay for comms, and maybe 5%, maybe 10%. Well, if their income level is way down, you say it's too expensive. Well, maybe yes, maybe no, because if we can lower the price. So Moore's Law has been very, very effective at dropping the price and increasing the capabilities of computers, of storage. Now it's into the cloud, but the connectivity hasn't really followed that. And I think the reason for that is that people are, in the U.S., people are generally okay paying $40 a month for broadband. It's not. I don't think the cost is really inhibiting things. On the other hand, if you're making $40 a month or $100, $200 a month, you don't want to. You can spend $5 a month on internet or phones and internet. So it's a matter of sort of applying Moore's Law to drive the cost down. And PCs, even while Moore's Law was going on, PCs were stuck at $2,000 for several years, or for many years. Then they were stuck at $1,000. Then the netbooks came out and they dropped into the hundreds. So there are sort of market pressures that kept the price up there. I think that happened to some degree in the connectivity, and so it's my observation that the technology allows the price to be greatly reduced, but we have to have a little change in business model, a little change in staffing to have a really low-cost service.
Right. I mean, I think that one of the other things that's changed recently is the ruggedness of things like tablets and smartphones are things that you could realistically take out into those kinds of climates and that kind of, just the environment, like, just riding in the back of a truck or something. You take a classic Dell from 2003, and by the time you've got to the other end of the road, everything's dropped out. Like all of the bits are just rattling around in the box.
Yeah.
So I think that this kind of the manufacturing of things to a layer of solidity. I know the glass is breakable, but there aren't as many kind of moving parts. I think that's made a huge difference.
Absolutely true, and related to that as well is the tablets and the smartphones have, well, phones in general have batteries, and so you don't need to be tethered to a source of power. Power is very unavailable in many places. So, but if you have a battery-powered device, then that's a help. So, but it's really, we'd like to catch the smartphone revolution. So it's really happening in rural places. Even if there's, the economics are marginal, people want their smartphone. It's an aspirational purchase. They will try and buy one even if they don't have internet service, because it's they can take pictures, they can listen to music, and it's a cool looking device. So it's something that they want to have.
Right. So you think it's aspirational even without maybe a high level of service. So maybe if they only get into internet cafe once a week, they still want the phone for the rest of the time.
Correct.
Interesting. Yeah, I've not thought of it like that. I mean, I think it's so. I mean, is this a philanthropic enterprise, or is this something that you think is going to make you super rich, or is it just something you feel you want to do, or how does it, like, where do you fit on that scale?
I don't think it's going to make me rich anytime soon. I do hope it will have a big impact. So what I'm after is a lot of people connected. I'd like to see 1 million people on the network in India. I think that'll happen next year, this year, well, probably next year. that'll make me feel good. And from there we can go to 10 or maybe way more than that. So I want to have an impact. You cannot have an impact by I don't think you can have a big impact by saying, well, it's a pilot program, or well, it's donations. Let's have lots of donations. That only goes so far. What I do think is that if you focus on costs and you bring the costs down to say this level, but the value that people perceive in the service that is expressed by how much they'll pay. If they'll pay more than it costs, then that's a margin, that's a profit. Well, in this business, typically you don't take the profit out of the business when instead you plow it back into the business and you get bigger and bigger. So that's why it's not going to make any of us rich anytime soon. But on the other hand, there's a chance that there's an exit if we get in a nice business after a while.
Right. So talk me through. I mean, I realize we probably should have done a proper introduction about formally what you're trying to achieve here. But talk me through what happens when a small town or a local school or something says, hey, we want internet connectivity, and somehow they get in contact with your guys. How does that process work? How do you even assess whether it's going to work? How do you work out whether the finances work? How does that play?
The first thing that we have to look at is this is all based on we need geographic continuity. We can service people in an area where we already have service. We can build it out. We can go to new areas, but we can't do a school here, another school 50 kilometers away, another school 200 kilometers away, because what we're doing is buying wholesale internet, and that's invariably from a fiber. So we're taking internet, and the minimum feeds typically are 10 to 50 megabits, something like that. So we're distributing it over some relays, and we're feeding it out to our end users. So we're buying wholesale internet, building our own infrastructure, relays, spreading it to where the users are, and selling them retail. And so we need a cluster. So if someone's way over in another state, we have to say, sorry, we don't have service there. However, but if they are in our service area, then, and we've decided ahead of time what our pricing is, we say here's our rates, and we give a very good rate to schools, and different rates for individuals and businesses.
So these relays, I mean, I've kind of seen the pictures, and I think the lead picture was like, basically a couple of Wi-Fi antennas up a pole pointing in opposite directions. Is that fairly typical of what they look like? And how do they exist?
Here, I'll show some pictures. This is from AirJaldi. Okay, now I have to make sure. See if I can get this screen sharing correctly. But yeah, it's we use a lot of Ubiquity. We use a lot of MikroTik gear, and this stuff is outdoor ready. It's low power, so we put it on little towers. We will. Okay, here we are. Here's some pictures. This is let's see if they come out. Oh dear, I have to. I'm getting. I have to enable something on my computer to let.
I'm seeing it actually. I'm seeing really? your Facebook.
Okay, great. Huh.
I don't know if anybody else is, but
yeah, we're seeing it.
Cool.
Okay, so let me try and get back to that and explain. So, okay, all these pictures. This is setting up. See where I'm just. This is on the AirJaldi's Facebook page. This is showing an installation, and that little dish. That we use a lot of those. That's a nano beam or a micro beam. I forget. Anyhow, they're about $100, even less, and they're easily good for 5 kilometers. It's because that little antenna across there is probably about 15 dB in gain. So that's like maybe a gain of 20 or 30x over what you have on a laptop. So here's a guy going up a tower, and we don't normally use. This is a large tower. Most of ours are shorter than that. Here's a little one of our guys showing some school kids, or they're watching him install, getting ready to climb a tower. Safety, we have to watch it. We have to follow proper safety procedures. That's what he's doing there. All right, let me.
So the picture is that each of these relays is line of sight within 5 or 10 kilometers of the previous one. And you're
Correct.
just bouncing it along, and if you,
Correct.
I mean, are they typically solar powered, or are they off the local grid, or a bit of
Mixed.
both? Or
We can do solar power very easily because a relay only pulls about, maybe 15 watts, maybe 10 to 20 watts of power. So that's easy to solar power. That's really less than a laptop uses on, when it's going. Let's see if I have some nice tower pictures. I think I do. Get rid of that. Let's go to our pictures. Now, what are you guys seeing?
you.
Okay, great.
So, I mean, I think one of the things that I'm interested in is whether, I mean, this is all Wi-Fi gear, and so ostensibly it is license free, but
Right.
are you ever having to run it at higher powers and therefore apply for licenses or frequencies that aren't unlicensed in the
No, we're not
countries you're
using
in?
higher power. The antennas are really what you want to use because the larger antenna you have, the more gain you have. That's kind of equivalent to an amplifier, but it works on both transmit and receive. It also narrows your signal. And so you're not listening to interference that's coming from the side. You're only looking straight ahead. So the bigger antennas we use on the bigger chunks, 30 dB. That's 1,000 times gain over what's in a antenna in here. So and we're putting out a bit stronger signal, but then the antenna amplifies it 1,000 times.
So you're not running anything in licensed spectrum, or you needing licenses for any of it?
We might look at it a little bit. So now there's really two companies that I'm involved in quite a bit that are doing this. One, AirJaldi, that we've been talking about in India. Another one is called Mwingu, and they're in Kenya. And Mwingu does use a lightly licensed technology called TV white spaces, or commonly known as TV white spaces. And that's down around the 700 megahertz range, where UHF TVs used to broadcast, but no one uses them anymore, and there weren't any in the middle of Kenya anyhow, and so the spectrum is lying there doing nothing. So the proposal is to have a flexible allocation mechanism. Unfortunately, progress to the regulators is very slow, but hopefully it will happen.
So have you found hardware to do that? Because I mean, I'm very interested in TV white space, but I've never found any usable hardware.
No, there is, Tim. There's a couple manufacturers. There's Adaptrum, there's Carlson Wireless, there's Six Harmonics, and in fact the UK is one of the countries that has sort of pioneered the licensing of this, and so I believe its licenses are readily available for a nominal charge, and if no one is using that, and you tell it what your geography is, the base station has to either be configured or have a GPS with its location. Then it consults the database and says, okay, let's see, and you can use channel 57, no problem.
So when I looked at this, I mean, it may be that the radios have improved since then, but when I looked at this, the width of the spectrum that was being allocated in those slots and the way that they were using it, you ended up with about 16 megabit, which was, and the thing that bothered me was that it was half duplex. And so this kind of conversation, I tried actually a WebRTC video call over it, and it failed miserably because the half duplex just stomped all over it.
No, it's true it's half duplex, but the response time should be much better than that. I mean, I've done it on over, and in fact, the Mwingu, we had a visit from Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, and he did a nice Skype video with another schoolhouse in India, and the link on both ends to the school was TV whitespace.
Cool. So which hardware were you using for that? I'm trying to remember whose I looked at.
Adaptrum, ADAPTRUM.
Okay, cool. I'll look them up. That's a good thing to know about. So so we've got these line of sight base stations that are license free. So I guess you only need the land, and presumably you need license to operate as a carrier or not?
Yes, we do, and that's quite important and a little sensitive. And if you're a mom and pop shop, you don't bother with that, and no one really bothers you, or maybe you have a friendly agreement with the local authorities. But if you want scale, you have to all your licenses absolutely correct. You have to have all your taxes absolutely correct. So this is a major barrier to entry. And in Kenya, it's not too expensive, but and we have a license there for, I believe, 3 counties. And you have to know how to do it, the different licenses. In India, we are just about getting an ISP license, and it's very expensive. So we've had to put a substantial amount of money in a bank account that has to sit there in case the Indian government decides we are not following their rules or not paying taxes, in which case they will shut us down and grab the money.
Scary.
Yeah, yeah.
So does that mean you have to, do you have the same thing that mobile phone operators have, but they have to have at least some knowledge of who their customers are and how they build them and that kind of stuff?
Absolutely true. And India is fairly strict about it. Kenya, not so much, but it's called KYC, Know Your Customer.
Right.
And in general, it's not legal in India, for instance, to have an open access internet that anyone can walk up and use without registering. However, what you can do and is accepted is you can, and this again works with a smartphone, is you can walk up and you can, the system can put up a captive portal screen, and you can enter your mobile phone number, and the system texts you a username and a password. Then you can get on, because the government believes that they have used the same KYC principle to get on the mobile phones. So they believe they know who's the user of each mobile phone, and if that phone number uses the internet, they believe it's the same person.
So it's kind of like WhatsApp. You're leveraging the existing existing numbering system and pulling that in as a kind of semi-identity.
Correct. Yeah.
Cool. No, that's well. So there is some regulatory burden, but it's not been excessive as yet by the way that I'm hearing it.
Yeah.
Cool. No, that's and so how, your endpoints. How many users?
Trying to get your attention there.
Sorry.
Looks like
I wanted to ask a question without interrupting. Jim, this is fascinating. I had no idea this kind of technology was what you were using, but I wanted to ask you, what are the principal uses for this? In other words, is this going mostly for educational, or is it recreational, for lack of a better word? Talk to us a little bit about that, the impact this is having.
For first approximation, people are using it. People in Africa, people are, Kenya, India, they're using it for the same reasons we are. And okay, they're not video conferencing at work. Actually, that's not true. In AirJaldi, the staff has a weekly video conference to 6 locations, and these are places that never had internet before, but now it's a nice video, conferencing. But typically, I don't know, at least half of what people do is social media, Facebook. They use WhatsApp a lot. It's a better texting thing than a pure, than a vanilla SMS. So they do, I would say, little to no email, text messaging, Facebook, things like that. There's a lot of interest in entertainment. So in India, Bollywood movies and music will be a good thing. And so, as a little anecdote, there are some various programs in India to set up these kiosk-like things, and the government tried to do a whole bunch. They were going to have 600,000, but they got nowhere near that, and most of them didn't work out because they didn't get enough bandwidth, and they commissioned the people with the authority to access certain government records, like land records, birth certificates, things like that. But that's just not enough business in that. Well, we did a program, or we've upped the bandwidth for some in eastern India in a state called Jharkhand. And so they're now getting, well, it's not a lot, but it's a way better, like about a half a megabit. And so you can do real things. And we've given them a bit more training, showed them. Now these guys are sitting there, and so they have their shop and they're doing these things, but they're selling music songs on thumb drives for 1 rupee per song, and movies for 10 rupees. So they're sitting there downloading. People come and they give them their thumb drives, and they charge 1 rupee, which is about cent and a half per song.
So how do people then play these thumb drives? What do they play them on?
Car stereos,
Okay.
or yeah. I don't know. Maybe they're also using like SDs, and some phones have SD slots.
Right. I'm just like it's just trying to understand what's the same and what's different. You know, there's
The greatest example of that is this amazing system in Cuba. I went to Cuba last year with the group trying to look at broadband community network, and we didn't get very far, but it was a nice trip. Anyhow, it turns out they have a very fantastic media distribution system called El Paquete, the packet, and you go to your friend down the street who's got a computer, and he's got all this content, and you give him your thumb drive, and you tell him what he wants, and he loads it up. Where he gets it from, anyhow, they have lots of current movies, all the Spanish novellas. It's unclear where it comes from, but they have amazing content, and it just gets passed drive to drive. So it's like SneakerNet or.
well, it's 50s Cadillac net, isn't it?
Yeah. But no, in general, they use it for the same sorts of things we do. And in general, we're not trying to reach the poorest of the poor. So we don't have a problem with literacy. We don't have a problem with we don't have to spend any effort on really on the awareness of the internet, because people are aware of it. They're using it, but a little bit. And our basic business proposition, and this is again for the smartphone generation for Wi-Fi hotspots. The business proposition is, look, we take the same internet content to your same device, only faster and cheaper in our locations. So they have it in town. Maybe they don't have service in their home, so they come into town. They have 2G or 3G, and they do different pricing plans. So some parts of India, rural India, 2G internet data is pretty cheap, but it's really slow. 3G is more expensive, serviceable. So our basic business proposition is come in with something much faster and cheaper than even the 3G is marketed at.
So I saw that Facebook are having like 2G Fridays or something. I can't remember which day of the week it was, but this idea that you were supposed to try out your new code to see how it played out on a 2G network, and I don't know how that's. And in fact, I suspect that may be what our friends Curtis and what they've been bought for. I think that may be something to do with it. I haven't talked to them since their acquisition by Facebook, but it'd be interesting to know what they're up to. But yeah. So I mean, essentially, what you're doing is using Wi-Fi, the economics of consumer Wi-Fi, to run internet into places where the telcos can't yet be bothered. Would that be a fair?
Yeah, although I wouldn't say they can't be bothered, but their system architecture, their equipment base, their their cost structure does not work.
Right.
Because hey, they'd like to make money. If someone came along and said, "Here's how to drop your cost by 1/10," they'd be there in a flash, because they could make money. And here's another way I think of what we're doing is that we're building a fixed infrastructure, and we're not aiming to solve all the problems that mobile does. So mobile's a great service, but it has limitations. We in the U.S. and Europe, East Asia, we have an alternative. We have the fixed infrastructure. So all of us right now on this conference, we're using the internet. And how do we get to the internet? Well, we have our access network, and maybe it's DSL, maybe it's fiber. I'm on a Comcast cable system. So everyone has different, that's a fixed network. I don't think any of us on this conference are using our, smartphones, the data plan on that. It might work, but it's just, why would you do that? You have, I got about 20 or 30 megabits of Comcast. Why would I, try and make it work on this? Most of Africa and most of Asia doesn't have that choice. They only have a mobile network. They never had fixed lines. They never had copper lines. Copper line penetration in India was less than 5%. So mobile phones came about 10 or 15 years ago, 10, 20 years ago. Everyone wanted a mobile phone because they didn't have anything else. So mobile phones were wonderful. They occupied all of the mind share, and they are wonderful, but they don't have to be the only thing. And so the other thing, in my mind, is an infrastructure that starts at, well, it includes fiber, spreads out, and it gets to a home or a business or the place for a hotspot with fiber, with microwave style relays. And the goal in this network is as fast as possible, as cheap as possible. And nowhere in this path is there licensed spectrum. There is fiber, there's high-speed microwave, so it's a different infrastructure, but it gets the same internet to the same devices.
So many years ago, we had Bruff Turner, I think he was.
Oh yeah, I know him. Yeah.
Yeah.
On talking about his thing in Boston, where he's doing kind of similar runaround, but in between tower blocks. But he's doing a network where you have multiple legs into. I mean, it's a kind of triangulated network where every node has like 3 peers, or I've forgotten what. I think it was 3 peers. Are you guys doing that? Do you have a like redundant feeds in, or is that excessive?
A little bit, and we'd like to, but in many cases, it's a fair bit of work to get one working path in the rural areas, and 2 would be, a second backup path would be nice, but we usually don't. We'd like to do that.
I want to try and kind of understand a little bit more about how these towers like happen. Do you like approach a landowner who happens to have a hill and say, guys, I'd like to put a tower here, or how does this play out? I mean,
Yeah. The way it works is it starts with desk work. So we know where we want to have service, and we get on Google Earth and we look, and then we look for likely hills, and then we pull up a tool, typically Radio Mobile, which knows how to pull up GIS data sets, and we tell it where the 2 points of interest are, and it checks and sees whether there's hills in the middle and whether we have a clear line of sight, because we need more than just a line of sight. We need a little bit wider than line of sight. So we need to clear what's called the Fresnel zone clearance. So then if the Radio Mobile looks good, then we send someone out there to field survey to see, can we get up, is there a road nearby, is there a landowner that we can deal with? And the funny thing about that is that needs to be strictly local. So I should not be in the town when they're doing that, because if they say me, a white guy, they're going to say, ooh, something's up. And then if someone comes around and wants to rent the land, they're going to ask for 10 times the price they otherwise would.
Right.
So I should not be anywhere near it. In fact, one of our guys who's really good, and he works in India, but he's Tibetan, so he looks different. He's the director. He's in charge of 30, 40 people. He will not be in that town when his guys are going to go try and negotiate to rent some land, because his face looking different, even though he speaks perfectly fluent Hindi, he can't be there because they know something's up.
Right, and they'll. But I mean, presumably you get like 5-year contracts on the land, or do you buy it outright?
No, we do 1-year contracts for rent, and we're typically what do we charge paying in India typically? And I'll show you some more pictures. A tower in India, a little more likely one, 3,000 rupees for a year, $50 for a year.
But has anyone tried to kind of at the end of the year say, hey, you guys are making too much money out of this, I want 10 times as much?
Another thing they'll do is they'll say, 1 year, but then the next year, oh, wow, I want 10 times as much. So that's just sort of normal business, I don't know, things you got to watch out for. Let me see if I can show you some more pictures. How do I get it to show in my photos? I'm trying. No, screen share.
I'm not the expert on this, I'm afraid.
Let's try this.
Right, that's your screen share. Cool.
Are you seeing? What are you guys seeing?
I'm seeing your photos.
Matrix,
Okay.
yeah.
Right. Okay. So here's some walking through an AirJaldi tower construction, and we have the local welders make these things now. So we show them once or twice in an area, and they go to the market to get these pipes, weld them together, paint them. There's some nice chickens in the foreground, and then the guys load it up. These are from several years ago, but that's a beat-up truck. That truck totally broke down or caught fire going down a bad road, and then the guys carry it up the hill. And so this guy, he's a network engineer. He's a he does does a lot of things. Well, includes carrying the stuff up the hill. And this is a completed typical small tower in India, AirJaldi tower. So we see a directional antenna on the top, another little directional antenna, so 2 radios. We see solar panels, and in here is a battery and possibly a router. The coolest thing, or thing I really am amazed at, is we can do this tower installed from concrete to solar and a radio for $1,200.
Brilliant, brilliant.
And it'll go 10 kilometers, 50 megabits. That's the about what it does. So it's wonderful.
So which species of Wi-Fi are we talking about there? I mean, is it like 5 gigahertz and?
Typically, we're using 5 gig for the backbones, and here's an installation above some shops. See it up there? We had to get above these palm trees, so a problem. But typically, we use the 5 gig, 5.8 gig for the backbone and trunks, and then typically 2.4 for customer for the last link to the customer prem.
And how is that G? Oh, sorry, go on, Michael.
I was going to ask. Some of the towers look quite tall. How have you had any difficulty with monsoon season?
Oh, yeah, sometimes. Monsoon season is very rough. The other thing we have problems with is monkeys. Monkeys love these towers and climb up on them and swing and stuff and break them. This is an unusually tall tower. Most are not this tall, and even there we had to stick a little booster pole on top of it.
Wow.
Looking down, but most of them are. Yeah, that's extra tall. We do more smaller towers rather than fewer tall towers.
Right, so a series of 5-kilometer hops rather than 115.
Now I can show you another thing, or I could put it. I have how long is this? A 2-minute video from the guys in Kenya. Can we show that, or what's the best way? It's on YouTube.
We need to get a YouTube URL or something because we won't hear your audio.
Right. Okay. So can I?
There's a chat window off in the.
Yeah, that's the first icon at the top.
Here we go.
So if you drop that into the chat, then somebody will be able to play it, I
I
think.
think I might be able to do this. Okay.
Here we go.
Give me a second to do it while you continue to talk.
Yeah. Go ahead. What were you asking, Tim?
I was just wondering whether it was like, G or N or whatever,
Yeah.
which Wi-Fi technology or.
Yeah, we started with G, but then moved to N, and now we're using AC in the backbones. And it's great. It's just more bandwidth. It's very wide channels, but in the rural areas. So the principal or the founder of the company in Kenya, the company again is called Mawingu, which is Swahili for cloud. So this fellow Malcolm Brew, he's Scottish, but he's been in East Africa most of his life. He fell in love with it somehow. He and his brother made the first ISP in Uganda way back in the day called Bushnet.
Oh, we're getting echo from somewhere now.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, the echo is going to come in when I play this. I don't know how.
Okay,
Well,
do you want to play it? And Jim and I can mute.
Yep.
Should we go ahead and try this? You tell me immediately if there's echo.
Go for it now.
But everybody has to mute.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's it. So that again is showing the installations in Kenya, Mwingu, and it's called Bucket5 because Malcolm's been putting these access points in plastic buckets because he's likes these Ubiquiti Unify devices. And I was on him to lower the price of his proposed system, and he noticed that the outdoor units were $120, but the indoor units were 50 or 70 bucks. So he's using indoor units and putting them inside this $3 bucket that he buys at the Nakamat supermarket there. This is a bit temporary, and because he's going to get a nice plastic sort of molded thing to put it up in there, and it'll look like a cloud, and the antennas will be up in this plastic cloud-like thing.
I like the branding of the buckets. Actually, I think you should stick with it.
Yeah, possibly. We're gonna wait and see what the sort of the users, what these installer guys, what they start calling it, and we'll try and follow their lead.
Right. Cool. Actually, I had a thought. It's probably not so relevant in Africa, but when we first started building the internet backbone in Holland, in wherever it was, 92, I guess. The cheapest way to do that was use spare capacity on the railways. So the railways had trackside cabling that they had spares on, and they would lease to you. I wonder if that plays out in India. Is that a route?
It does, and we're talking to them, and would love to do that. There's an entity in India called Railtel, and it is using infrastructure the railroads have had, and they've more recently they've been putting fiber along so they have little towers every so often, they have fiber in certain places, so that's great, and it's just a matter of working out, and we're now at the scale where we can effectively talk with them and plan to use that.
Right, because I mean that was a series of maneuvers that worked really well in Holland.
Yeah. No, it's true. And then same thing in the U.S. Sprint, for instance, you must know about that. Sprint was started because it was somebody had there was Southern Pacific Railroad, and they had signaling cables down their path, and someone decided, we could put fiber in there, and this was in the early stages of telephone deregulation, so they made a long-distance phone company out of the right-of-way that the railroads had. Right.
I mean, and it's it's accessible to some extent, and there's a whole load of nice benefits of it.
We do have to watch out in the mountainous areas in India. Is the fiber is subject to landslides, and at some degree, so you would need redundancy, or you would expect to have outages. If 10 meters of the road drops down the mountainside, the fiber it's going to be affected.
Right, but hopefully your tower isn't going to be there, so you'll be.
So the towers, the wireless goes over all of that, so it's a little bit potentially more reliable than the fiber.
Cool. I think I'm kind of out of questions, but I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in. I don't know if we've got anything on. I haven't been watching IRC. I really should have been actually, but and likewise anyone on ZipDX or whatever.
I would ask, first of all, this is fascinating, and secondly, I'd ask how satisfied you've been with the some of the control systems, because all that Unify stuff, Ubiquiti stuff, it has some reasonably sophisticated software provisioning and all this. Have they been up to scratch, or have you had to roll your own on any of that kind of management?
Well, yeah, we've always used a bunch of. There's a set of very common, well-used open source tools, Nagios, SmokePing, some others. So we use those. We've been also using a thing from a company in Czech Republic called ISP Admin, and it has inventory, it has trouble ticket tracking, things like that. We have had to add our own for the prepaid billing system, and so AirJaldi has done one, and we're doing a service under JaldiFi. We've also done a nice project with Facebook, their Internet.org group, and they have their own software called Express Wi-Fi, and so we're doing some deployments with that, and that's also a prepaid billing system. So the billing management work has been done recently and needed, because Well, we had adequate management systems for fixed network, but this prepaid for mobile was a little different.
Thank you.
I have
a question.
Andy, go first.
Oh, okay. I was just thinking about, we've got some upcoming new technologies with Google and their balloons and Facebook with their very high-flying planes. How much do you see this impacting and maybe joining in with the sort of things that you're working on?
I would love to see those. I think they're going to have some challenges in some areas. I think that those could well be useful as an alternate way, sort of an alternate backhaul or an alternate way to get bandwidth to a place. But once you get it once you beam it down from the sky, I think you still need ground connectivity story and a bit of terrestrial deployment, and really critically, you need some people on the ground that understand this. Because I don't think the signals I don't think it's going to work out to have it beam down to a handheld device. Because I think, all right, one of them cases they're going to have an LTE transmitter up there, and so maybe it works, but I think that the economics and for various reasons you want Wi-Fi on the ground, but you also want people on the ground that understand this, because otherwise, I think what's going to happen is my internet doesn't work. Well, it's because your device ran out of batteries, or because you somehow you're insisting on using Wi-Fi, but it's using something else. There's any number of local problems that you need some understanding of the network. So we've all seen that with parents or grandparents, and the kid goes over and, oh, here, Grandma, do this. Oh, okay, great, it works.
So how does that work with the you talked about the billing models? How does that play out for the buckets? You've got a user who's signed up. We've said they have to sign up. There's a kind of know your customer thing. But how do they then pay for it? Is it a prepay model, or how does that go?
Prepay model, and we very much need and use agents. So similar to prepay for mobile voice and SMS. You would go to a shop, a top-up shop. So we have an agent in each of these places, and he helps you get connected. But you pay him. The users would pay him cash, so 100 Kenyan shillings or 100 Indian rupees, and he gets the cash. He makes an entry, so he's got an account into our billing system, and he updates their account, and then they have airtime, as it were.
So that and then so it's not like the franchise model where he would buy the airtime from you and then resell it, or
in the end it's somewhat like that, in that if he's collecting cash from these people, you only want to give him a certain he can dip into his account a certain amount, but then he's got to top up his own account before he can sell more things. So it's kind of like that, but it's really a sales agent. They're not doing any technical work. We might explore that, especially in Kenya. Malcolm wants to set up kits ready to go, give it to someone. Here it's got instructions, and just as you saw in the video, he envisions people would take the kit of gear, set it up, and then they could be in business.
Do you not have to have, I mean, the thing we found, I don't know if you remember this, but the thing we found with Burning Man is the problem with these things is that unless you've got an omnidirectional antenna in the center, then you have to have both ends coordinating one of those line of sight.
Sure. Yeah.
Go on. Remind me. I'll go.
Yeah. No, we have point-to-point is typically used for backbones, for trunks. We do use point-to-multipoint in some cases. So in an area there'll be 6 or 10 subscribers that can all see one small mast. So that small mast will put a unidirectional antenna, or rather an omnidirectional antenna on it, or maybe a panel antenna that's a sector, and they'll all have their directional antennas pointing at it. So there's these different sort of topologies.
So this is a logistical problem that we ran into in Burning Man, and I don't know if you remember it, but that if you don't have communications, it's really difficult for you to coordinate both ends of a point-to-point link. So how do you solve that?
Well, there's typically cell phone coverage. So the one guy just calls the other guy and says, "Hey,
from halfway up the tower." Right. Huh.
Semaphore, Tim. Semaphore.
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah, and,
they have got line of sight. That's right. Cool. But so that's really interesting. So in two ways now, you're leveraging off the 2G network.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's fascinating. I hadn't really and completely.
Well, I mean, we're going to do more than that, because the prepaid service, they're marketing it. Our marketing is going to amount to, hey, it's cheaper and faster here. But they'll spend a lot more effort on the awareness of the internet and things like that.
Okay, and I guess the other thing is you don't have to carry the phones. You don't have to have the stock of selling the phone.
We don't carry the phones. We don't do email accounts. All we do is connectivity.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I really hadn't thought about that as a set of models. That's cute. I like that. And on the 2G front, you say that the 2G coverage is pretty good in both of those countries, or for data.
Kenya is I don't know. Kenya's different. I think there's a lot of uncovered areas. There are areas that are rural. Maybe there's cattle grazing out there, but there's no service. There's no a lot of Kenya is off grid.
Right.
India is different. India's grid is pretty widespread. Okay, it may be out 3 hours a day, but you can get your phone charged when it's on.
But in terms of the cell phone coverage in India, 2G is reasonably well spread out, and they've all got data enabled on. I mean, not the users, but the cells have got data enabled on.
Yes.
Okay, because I'm.
And the mobile operators just see a nice progression. Okay, we have 2G there now. We'll get 3G there, a week after Tuesday, and then we'll have 4G, and then we'll have 5G, and it'll be great. It's my belief, however, that the technology that they're using for that is not optimal in the sense that I think we can do faster and cheaper this way. And I draw analogies. There's look back at historically. Oh, gee, there was dial-up modems, and there was X25, and there was frame relay, and well, then there was the internet, and there was packet on sonnet, and there was Metro Ethernet, and everyone said, oh, Ethernet's terrible, and we need T1 circuits, we need SDH, we need 50 millisecond failover. In the end, faster and cheaper beat over fancier and more involved.
Right. Yeah, no, the complexity.
All their stuff, and I'll posit that that's required for their primary service, mobile. So they do handovers at 60 miles an hour. That's pretty cool, but we don't. But I think that I look at the path, the equipment between the fiber and the last transmitter to the user. I think that needs to be as cheap as possible and as fast as possible.
That's interesting. No, I was asking about the 2G for purely selfish reasons, which is that I'm playing with this Internet of Things security model, and I've found that it runs reasonably well over 2G. So I'm trying to get a sense of what where that works, where that applies. So cool. No, thank you for the info there. Randy, you were going to ask a question, but I don't remember what it was.
First of all, Andy asked the question that I was going to ask, which had to do with I think it was the other ideas, satellites and internet.
Oh, yeah.
Jim, you mentioned internet.org. So that's been answered. I'm just, this is absolutely fascinating, and I just wanted to share with you that my own experience, I'm located in France, and for a long time, 3G at the time, and 2G, all of that was prohibitively expensive, so I was we have to have ubiquitous Wi-Fi, which, I mean, to some extent there is, and if you have internet at home here in this country, all of the providers of internet, all the ISPs, have Wi-Fi. They have hundreds of points all over the country, and that's kind of similar to the effect that you're achieving, really. But anyway,
if you think about it, what that was predicated on is that there was an infrastructure that could deliver broadband internet, and then you put a Wi-Fi hotspot on it, which is trivial, and then you say, oh look, I have internet, and so when you come over, you can use my Wi-Fi, and there's many people, and there's things like phone, which are using and sharing, but all of that is predicated on an infrastructure, a fixed infrastructure that you can hang a hotspot on. Where we're working in India and in Kenya, there is no such thing.
Right. No, and exactly. And I mean, that's kind of speaks to my point, which is that we were lucky enough to have that going. Now, in this country, we mostly, and in the UK, as far as I know, mostly you've got 4G or worst case 3G, but you've still got areas that aren't covered. And so what you're talking about between the microwave and whatever else is coming from bringing the backhaul to the people, I mean, it's got to be different. So this is why I think this is fascinating, that we haven't had to think about it where we're located. But it's great.
Yeah.
Have you looked at the idea of paying the tower people whose land you're building towers on in kind? So one of the guys, one of the things out here, Randy just reminded me by accident that there's a project here called Barn, which is a rural fiber network, and basically they pay the farmers to dig trenches and lay fiber across the land, but they pay them in internet connectivity.
Yep. Now we have done similar things, and in Kenya we do a lot of that, pay in kind, and I'm trying to show. I have some nice pictures if I can find it. Yeah, here we go. Here's an example. Let's see if we can switch back. So, okay, screen share. Okay, are we seeing my picture now?
No.
Not yet.
Oh, hang on, I didn't start it yet. Here we go.
There we go.
This is a location for a little tower. This is on the top of a hill in rural Kenya. That's Malcolm with the pink shorts. And this location was good for a relay. There's an old lady lives there, and with her daughter and granddaughter, there's the grandmother and the little kid. And so she gets paid for the use of her land by, she got a new roof, and she got electricity from the solar panel to light up for a couple LED lights. So that's her payment. And she might also get a USB charging point, so she could charge other people's phones. But it's so in some cases we don't pay for rent. In some cases we offer this other service, like some LED lights or charging.
So how valuable is that LED light thing? I'm asking because one of the things I lent money to on Kiva was an LED lighting plan, and I was kind of
very much so. In East Africa, there's a huge business, lots of impact investors in it, some large-scale providers doing various scale solar things. And even I saw some small ones that are a 2-watt panel can drive a small battery, a couple LEDs for 3 hours, and a USB port for charging a phone. That'll retail for, I don't know, $25 or $50. Maybe it's $25 in China. That's too expensive for the target market, so they have a prepaid plan on that, or rent to own. Put $15 down, take it home, and it'll go for a week, but you have to top it up for it to go some more. So it's a very active area in East Africa. India, not so much. There's different power. India, the power is cheaper. In Kenya, it's more expensive.
Well, I mean, as you may remember from the Burning Man stuff, I'm a huge fan of solar power.
Oh yeah, it's great.
And it's just the reliability is really hard to beat, but you need a decent area to get any watts out of it.
Yeah.
I think we need to ask about Range Networks here, and so Jim, what is the relation there?
Range Networks is a company. They are a different business. They're equipment maker, software, mostly for, their goal is an open source based mobile base station. So it makes a 2G signal, it makes a 3G signal now as well.
And I recall, and I'm sure Tim was there when the first time. Where was this? Was this an Astracon or one of the meetups where David was there, and he goes, "Hey, everybody, look at your cell phones," and there was a weird network.
Oh, that was a MooCon.
Yeah. All right. Well, a MooCon. Wow.
That was Germany.
Sadly, yes.
Yes, we suddenly had an AT&T signal in the middle of Rostock.
It's great.
What is the other one? Oh, there's another nice one. I'm putting a couple other URLs for afterwards if you guys want to look. Where is this?
So have these installations, have they been up long enough to see reach the end of a life cycle on a local battery install, and have you had to go and service battery packs and that kind of thing?
We have had to service battery packs a lot. The guys in India are a little bit, they use rules of thumb on how much battery, and they're typically more concerned about the price than the longevity, and so wait a second, I'll just find this thing.
So are they lead acid or NiCads or what?
Lead acid. We use We just get them in the local markets. They're typically motorcycle batteries or truck batteries or car batteries, depending on. We put a decent solar charge controller on them, but they're just vanilla batteries. So what the servicing we have had to do is they run out, and in the middle of a monsoon, you get 7 days with no sun, and then you didn't have a big enough battery, and it runs out, and so then two guys will get on a motorcycle, one driving, the other holding the battery between his legs, and they'll drive on the motorcycle in the rain for an hour or 3 hours and change the battery. It's kind of crazy.
That's massive dedication. That's a wonderful team.
They really are. So a couple of other URLs I put up there in the chat window. WNDW.net is a website for a free-to-download book that my friends wrote and I helped publish. And we're to 7 languages now: English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic. We did 1 edition, Indonesian, and Myanmar language. WinguNetworks.com, the URL. Underneath that one is a Microsoft URL. That's a cool video they did of Wingu and some of the people. They brought in a really good media team, and it's nice.
Okay, I put those into IRC for those who are listening live, and we'll include those into the blog post as well. Anybody else take advantage of the chance that because it was hard to trap Tim. What do we got him? Tim.
Yeah, I'm easy.
Tim's easy.
That's right.
I'm not the guy who goes out, on wild adventures all over the world. Well, not quite as wild as Jim's.
Well,
Last year was crazy for me. I did 3 trips to India, 3 trips to Kenya, although one of those was a trip to both places. A trip to Cuba, 2 sailing trips to Hawaii, 2 trips to Hawaii. So it's not always rural Africa and India. So.
So tell us about the tech you take on your sailing trips.
So my buddy, he goes offshore, and I will go with him occasionally. He's got this thing called Sailmet. He's got a SSB. He's got a SSB radio, single sideband HF radio. His antenna goes up the backstay, and then there's a thing that a guy named Stan Honey created, which there were existing modems that would work over a voice grade HF channel, do 1200 bits, something like that. But Stan Honey got some licenses, bought some equipment. Stan Honey's the guy who invented on American football, the first down marker is projected onto the screen, and in the America's Cup he has this fancy video system to show where the boundaries are and the speed of the boats. So he's got a network, and so the boats in the middle of the sea can do email, and they can pull down weather files. But you have to go to and there's a bit of manual work. You go to the radio, the computer listens, and there's USB connection, and it tells you the different bands and which relays it can be reached. And so you select one of them, and then you can get 1200 baud internet.
Wow, modem, it's dial-up modem on a boat. Cool.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, that's fascinating, because a couple of the guys are ex-radio hams as well. So they're I'm not, but
Pactor modems or something like that. I forget exactly, but it works.
It's fascinating that all of this radio stuff is reopening with at least some degree of spectrum liberalization, and also the fact that the Internet of Things has got a really interesting set of requirements that are.
So I draw an analogy. I don't know how much time we have, but if you look at 4 major infrastructure systems in the world, there is the train system, the phone system, the highways and roads and cars system, and the internet. And I think that the phone system is somewhat like the railroad system in that it tends to be pretty monolithic, traditionally was a single owner, so traditionally there was this state-owned railroad, and then there was a state-owned phone system. So very homogeneous, single owner. Now they've softened that up a little bit. But by contrast, the highway system is very diverse. You have superhighways built by the federal government, the local roads, even some private roads. You have all manner of ownership of the vehicles, buses, trucks, cars, private. In India and Africa, you see bicycles on the road. So anything goes on the road. And private people own the gas stations. So the ownership is very spread out. And people try anything. There's really only one rule: don't hit someone. But otherwise, you can use the roads. So the internet is like that, and the internet has fiber, it has, you know, DSL, it has whatever, it has this Wi-Fi stuff, and it's all the internet. Mobile is more like the railroad system, and then it's monolithic. Everyone does the same thing. Where it works, it's great. If it doesn't work, sorry. Can I extend it? No, no, no. This is our network. It'd be like asking, you know, British Tel, can I extend your phone system? Or British Rail, you know, gee, can I run a spur down to my place? It doesn't happen. But the highways, sure. You put a road out to the highway, great. Good for you. So that's the internet. The internet is, you know, very messy, but does pretty well.
Cool. Yeah, no, I agree.
Amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. Well, we'll have to do another edition about Burning Man, because that's a fascinating topic, and I'm curious about all of that. And Tim has regaled us with many stories, and I'd like to hear more. I'm not sure I have the gumption I need to get over there. It's a much longer journey for me, but that's fantastic. That's really amazing. Okay, anybody else? Final question. Here's your last chance. And I'm not hearing anything. We've compressed the time so that, you know, there's like hours go by, nobody's asked anything. Okay. All right, well, we're going to close the session now. Thanks to everybody who takes part in this thing. Thank you, Tim. Great idea to invite Jim, and thank you, Jim, obviously.
You're welcome. Nice to meet you, Andy.
Great to meet you. Hope to meet you in person someday.
Yeah. Where in France are you?
I'm in Bordeaux, so if you like wine by any chance, we're well served.
Good.
Okay, we're stopping the broadcast. This is what we laughingly refer to as the mature audiences segment coming up, which is more or less private and audio only. Here's the stop button. I'm hitting it. See you next week.
All right, good. Thanks all.
Okay.
Bye.